They had used it as rental property, and then the people that they allowed to have it were on welfare, and those people, I worked in the welfare office, and those people were so negligent that the house it was nasty and filthy and we went, and it had wall, it didn't have wall underneath, but it had nice carpets and drapes, and we had to take up not only the carpet off the floor, but we had to take up all the padding. There was urine inside the walls, places where you couldn't even imagine. This house had all of the things. They had a bathroom and everything. But it was just, the person was so depressed, so sick. They had 7 or 8 kids.
Why did they leave how did the Sacramento house become a rental?
Well, they bought it for income property. My folks had other property. Like they owned some property across the street from Grandma. They had 40 acres. When I got married, I said to my sister, "Where'd all this money come from to take care of all this stuff?" Because I come up from San Francisco. My dad says, "I'll take care of everything." This is 1968, and I knew my folks were doing okay. I said, "So where does this money come from?" I said to my sister, "I don't say to them because we were shelling out money like crazy." And I said, "Where?" And my sister said, "Oh, they sold that 40 acres they had up on March Mountain."
Oh my goodness!
So they had bought that for income property. So they just, when they needed some money, they sold it. So that's how they did that.
When did you graduate from college?
I graduated from Melrose in 51.
51.
Yeah. And then I graduated from Loyola in Chicago in 1960.
Where did you get married?
1968.
And that's when you lived in California at that time?
I went to California in 63.
Okay.
And met my husband in 66 and got married in 68. We had to get a Roman dispensation because I'm a Catholic, and he'd been married before, so we had to go through all that jazz.
Oh.
And then we got married here in Portland. There's a picture.
So he's from California?
My husband, yeah. Well, he's from California by way of Kansas. He came from Kansas. But there's a picture, my wedding picture right there. It's there because, you can see it just right there across the room. You can pick it up if you want to.
You told, when you filled out the form at the senior center, you said he was a radio announcer and a fiber optics engineer.
He's a fiber optics engineer. He was a radio announcer part-time. He was a very magnificent speaking voice, incredible speaking voice. Somebody said yesterday somebody had a nice voice, and I just looked at them and I thought to myself, "You don't even know what a nice voice is." I had this husband who would just say good morning to you or hello to you, and his voice just kind of rolled, it was no effort. It was just the way God made him.
Like James Earl Jones?
Yeah, it was one of those
distinctive voice.
One of those wonderful voices,
I know Ken Boddy, and every time I see him, he and I are on a board of an organization together. Every time I walk in and he comes in, I say, Ken, I could close my eyes. I could hear you anywhere in the world.
That's
and I would know it was you.
Yeah, he's a nice voice. It was a wonderful voice. It was just marvelous. But he worked for Southern Pacific as assistant engineer. And then they were going to lay off everybody. And so he then said, well, I'll apply for this job with Sprint. So the Southern Pacific owned Sprint at the time.
Really?
Applied for the Sprint means Southern Pacific. The Sprint was developed by Southern Pacific. And he went to their Sprint corporation, and they hired him and loved him, and he loved working for them. And he was in charge of their fiber optics line from Anaheim to Los Angeles. And you guys may not know this, but that's a 60-mile stretch, and it's very Orange County, and it's very non-black. And so he's the only black person down there working with these folks. And it was sometimes very difficult. But he did have 5 engineers from Japan that he worked with, and he said they were absolutely wonderful.
So you guys lived down there?
We lived in Oakland, in the Oakland Hills. No, I lived in Oakland.
You have any children?
No, my husband has 3 sons, but I didn't. I wish, listen, my heart and soul. I always knew, I'm the oldest of 7 kids. I always knew I was going to have 10 kids. Never had one, never got pregnant for a minute. So, I mean, that's just the way God planned it. I didn't have anything to do.
True.
I've been busy taking care of everybody else's kids.
I
I never had any of
know.
my own. Yeah, I got brothers and sisters' kids to take care of and grandkids and everything. I have 2 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren, but they're my husband. And they're in California. Yeah. Oh, they're darling. I did run into your sister-in-law the other day with the 3 children. I just looked and I thought, oh, there they are. It's wonderful.
And if you see her with her, if you see her twin sister, then you go.
Oh yeah, I know
"Wait a
him. Yeah, I
minute."
know him.
What was your husband's name?
My husband's name was actually Cleo Brown, C-L-E-O, and he was called Scott Brown on the radio. So our wedding invitation said Scott Cleo Brown, but his name was legally Cleo Brown. He's actually from
Kansas.
yeah, he went to Lyons High School and graduate of Lyons High School in Kansas, and went to school, college there. He didn't finish. He went to college there. It's a private school, and I know its name very well, but I can't think of the song. Sorry.
And what brought you back to Portland?
My husband died suddenly in 1985, and I was working as a casework supervisor in child welfare, and I said, I can be lonely in Portland as well as in Oakland, and I loved where I lived in Oakland, but I stayed there a year and then retired and came here, and I didn't work for about a year, and then I said, oh, I gotta go back to work. I can't stand this. So I went back to work. I do a lot of volunteer work, but I do not hold a job.
So, but you worked for the state from 87 to 92. 52
Yeah.
to 63, then you were in California, and then
But-
87 to 92.
Well, I actually worked for the state of Oregon from 1952 to 1963. Yeah, because I started work as a social worker in 1952, and then I just changed departments. But I worked as a social worker, and I went to graduate school in there, but I was fully employed by the state while I was at graduate school, even though I was in Denver and Chicago.
What, of the rest of the Bagleys, you know, do you have any aunts and uncles that are still alive?
Well, the thing is, got Aunt Ruby, who is Ruby Bagley Kent, is married to James Kent, and she is my father's sister. She is now about 70. Oh, she's about 80 years old. Wow, I didn't realize that. I'm 68. She's about 80 years old. She'll be 80 years old on September 3rd. And she's got a stroke. She has a stroke that has left her completely paralyzed. And she can't take care of herself. Her daughter, Jackie, takes care of her. And I have another, and Aunt Ruby has some children. Aunt Ruby was married first to, you can find this in the newspaper too. She's married first to Clarence Nailing, N-A-L-I-N-G, and she has 3 children by him who are Connie, Shirley, and Jackie. Then he is killed in a fire because he smoked and burned up in a fire. He was a railroad man. My aunt was on a trip when he burned up. She was on the train going somewhere. But anyway, then Aunt Ruby got married to a man whose name was Leo Turner, and he was a prize fighter, and she had triplets by him. I'm serious. It was in the newspaper. This is about early 40s. It's in the newspaper, and the little girl died at about 6 months. I guess it was Sis. And the two boys lived to be grown up, and one of the boys just died, and there's only one boy left. Then she got married to James Kent, who she's still married to, but she's not with because he's at their house, and the child is, the woman is at her daughter's house. And she had a child by James Kent, and that child has some children that are still living, and the interesting thing about that is there were some children in that family of hers that got burned up in a fire. And
Good Lord.
the family, some horrible thing happened. This happened in the 60s. This is in the newspaper too. It's just a dreadful story. But anyway, got burned up in a fire because it was the family's fault. They were doing something about the fire during cold weather, and it was kind of something you shouldn't do, you know. So a son and a granddaughter got burned up in that fire. And that's the Kent children. Now, and I don't know any more than that about them. Then my Aunt Gladys, who's Gladys Bagley Dove, lives in Tacoma. And she has two children. One daughter is doing just fine and has always done fine. And she has a son who got into drugs very early, and she never sees him. He's like gone. He's just out of it. Then my dad has a brother, Albertus Bagley, who lives in the Washington, D.C. area. And he was married to Ardell English in 1939. And they live in Washington, D.C. And they have 3 children. One of their kids is a dentist. One of them is I don't know what, and I do not know them.
Is she from here?
Ardell English is
Yeah,
from
that
here.
English name.
She went to
Mrs. Elizabeth Dunn Davis always emphasizes, I mean, when she talks about her own family, she says there's the English family and there's the Nailing family. Those are 2 of the names that she brings up.
Okay, because in Ardell English, parents lived here. That's true. And she went to the University of Oregon. I don't know the name. She went to the University of Oregon, and I will tell you who does know all about them is Ellen Law went to the University of Oregon with Ardell English, and she said, Laverne, she was crazy when I went to school with her. I said, she's even crazier now. And my uncle, who had a job... Albertus. We always called him Uncle Bert. But anyway, his name is Albertus. It's T-U-S. Albertus. And he was, I guess, one of the first ones in the family to get a little bit of college education. He went to business school and got a clerical job, and then went to work for Social Security and had a good job, has a nice home in Washington, D.C. But now he has Alzheimer's, which is unusual in our family. We've never had it. And he's in a nursing home in Kensington, Maryland, which is kind of sad. But his wife is so crazy when I wanted to see him when I went back there. She only gave me, you know, and I should have gone and seen him. Anyway, because I haven't seen him since 39.
Oh, I wish I had this big index with me.
But anyway, he was one of the kids in the family who had done, you know, really well. And then my father's brother, Herbert, he was in the service, but Herbert Bagley was married to, you'll never believe this, I have to say, Willie Mae Hart was his first wife. Just keep your mouth shut. And
I don't think she's brought that up.
Well, she wouldn't, because she was you know why? Let me tell you, I talked to her. And she and he were very close. They did fine. They were, the whole family liked her, except that my Aunt Ruby is a extremely imaginative person and always would tell a story any way that it suited her, and she had more cracks in the family than anybody. She could cause, we had disruption in our family from her
telling tales.
Yes, and it was really incredible. She was just that kind of person. And my Willie Mae, and I remember her when she was married to my uncle, Willie Mae said, you know, I just love Mrs. Bagley, Mayberg Bagley. She said, we just got along very well. She said, we never had a problem. She said, but Ruby was in the middle of it. And Ruby he made up some story.
I'm sure she's mentioned that she was married to him.
I think you did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
And then he married. Now let me tell you who he married next.
So they split up.
They split up because
Right. Mm-hmm.
if you've got somebody just howling at you, what do? Anyway, then Uncle Herbert married somebody named Helen, who was a rather uneducated woman, and just kind of a crazy lady. She had 2 children, and those children, everybody in the family debates whether or not they're Uncle Herbert's children. So we'll move on to the next lady. The next lady he married is Willa, W-I-L-L-A, Willa Bagley. And she is a wonderful human being, and she's kind of a mainstay at St. Philip's Church now, and has been for the last 20 or 30 years. But that's who he wound up married to. And he did janitor work, I think, most of his life. I don't think he ever did. And he was this guy who always dressed beautifully and always was,
Tell me about you converting to Catholicism. When you became a Catholic.
Oh, that's very interesting. I just went to Catholic school, and everybody else was being Catholic, and I said, well, why can't I be? And my parents said, no, you can't be. And I said, yes, but I want to be. And so I laid down for like 2 years, and then when I was 8 years old, they let me get baptized.
So you went to Ascension, which was down
76 in Yamhill.
I thought it was that much closer in.
No. We lived at Ventura Park when I went to Ascension.
No, Ascension is a school?
It's a Catholic grade school.
Grade school.
But it doesn't exist anymore. In fact, when I went to Catholic grade school, let me tell you what it looked like. It was this great, big, huge building that had, well, it probably wasn't that huge, but it seemed so to me. And it had the church on the third, up here on top. Then it had the school on the second part, and then it had this big, huge basement. And people complained for years about having to walk up the stairs. So in 1953 or 56, they built a new Ascension Catholic grade school, what have you. And it was, when I write the story of my life, I will say that it was sort of isolating being Catholic in a white community. Mm-hmm. And having mostly social functions in a Protestant facility, it was hard. So there was a lot of, that's a whole nother story.
Did you ever worship in Alabama, in Northeast, at Immaculate Heart?
Oh, I go to any Catholic church. Right now, I'm a part of the church here at Madeline, which is on 24th and Siskiyou. And I lecture on Sunday. In fact, I have to lecture this Sunday coming up.
Oh.
But at 11 o'clock Mass, but I do that once a month. But no, I go to everywhere I've ever lived. I've always gone to whatever Catholic church was wherever I was. Yeah. I lived in Oswego for 2 years, and I was lecturer at that church at Our Lady of the Lake. And I lived over here in Southeast for a while, and I was a lecturer. Oh, I wasn't a lecturer there. I did a whole bunch of other stuff there.
Now, what is a lecture? Is that
lecture
like
just
a
reads. You just read the readings for the day.
Oh, okay.
You read the readings. That's all you do. It doesn't mean anything other than read. Specific time of the Mass, you read the readings before the Gospel.
When did your parents pass away?
My mother died in 1977. Her name is Bessie James Bagley. And she died in 1977, May. And my daddy died in 1982, March.
And they were, at the time that they passed,
they lived at 2340. Wait a minute. My mother. They bought this house.
We've got to see Mr. Rutherford Getter, because between the two of you, he's not fixed on the numbers. He doesn't know the numbers in terms of addresses.
But he knows
the names.
Yeah, the names are what he needs to know. My father just bought the property at 2343 Northeast 11th when my mother died. And he died at that address too. But they had the property across the street at 2346 Northeast 11th from like 1955 until.
Did they ever live there?
They lived at that.
Oh, so they were there.
Yeah.
Somehow I seem to keep losing when they got out of West Lynn.
Well, that was like 50, 51.
Oh, yeah, right.
And then at 55, they went to the house on Northeast 11th.
2346 Northeast 11th. In
Yeah.
1977, bought 2343, and your mother passed away.
Yeah, and he
And
got
your
it 10
grandfather-
days
your
before
dad.
she died.
And your
he got
father
it for
moved.
her.
And your father moved into that house.
He moved her into that house
Oh my goodness.
because they did it on purpose. The big house across the street, great big house, had 3 floors. It was a wonderful house, 5 bedrooms, all that. But you had to walk upstairs to get to the bedroom, and she had cancer, and it was really hard. And she had open heart surgery, So, and he had heart trouble too. So, and I remember him sneaking down the stairs. The doctor said, "You can't do this." And I said, "Daddy, how did you get down here?" He said, "Oh, I sneaked down." And I mean, when a person has heart trouble, it's really a lot of work. I mean, it isn't.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of work. It isn't just,
Your father's name was Donald, right?
Pardon me?
Your father's name was Donald?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
Deal.
Donnell.
Donnell
Donnell was the legal name, but he never used it. So all his documents and everything say Deal NALD. And my brother Don is Donald Ward Bagley Jr.
Oh.
Yeah, so we did. And my daddy had another sister, Eunice, is the one that's in that book. Yeah, Eunice is in that book. And
That thing is all over the paper when that accident
really?
happened.
That would have been horrible. It was on the fridge or something.
Well, and Eddie Binford was accused of
I remember
speeding,
Eddie Binford.
and then he was exonerated, and
Listen, you guys, I remember Eddie Binford. Let me tell you about Eddie Binford. Eddie Binford was this cute little man. And, I'm a
he's
kid.
an electrician.
Who, him?
Yeah.
I don't know what he was. All I know is he came to visit my mom and dad. And he was this cute little man, and he used to dress really nice. And he'd come to my grandparents' house. I remember he met Grandma, the Bagley grandparents, and he would come to our house up in Bentonville. And Eddie Binford would come, and he'd always have these fancy clothes. And he would come in knickers, and the socks, and the shoes, and he was cute, the
In
little
the
hat,
30s?
and he's pretty. Oh, yes, this is when I was a little kid. And
so even after that accident, I mean, there was
oh yeah,
a
because
lot
that
of
accident,
bitterness
that accident happened before I was
28.
born.
Yeah, 28.
So that my parents weren't thinking about me in 28, and that happened. And he literally, he came to see my folks, and there was whatever the bitterness was. I didn't see it because he was considered a friend. The family was always very sad on losing Eunice, though. Eunice has been a ghost in the family since I was a child, and the whole family, apparently, she's the oldest sister, I guess, and they just idolized her, and they couldn't believe that and nobody ever talked about, though, I never heard anybody talk about animosity or anger or
Well,
they were just so sad that she was gone. That's what I remember. It's just like, how could she be gone?
I have the newspaper account
do
of the
you?
accident. Yeah.
Oh, you're kidding.
From the Advocate.
That is just so, that's the saddest thing in the world to the family. Every time, whenever you talk about it or think about it, it's just really, really sad. I mean, it's just like, well, how could she have died? She's our sister, and she's our special sister.
And so young.
And that was it. And they were like, here's the book, my mother's book. And that's got a picture of the school. That's got a picture, you guys, of the school in there.
A girls' college.
Yeah, and it tells you, I think, where it is, if I'm not mistaken.
1927.
Yeah, isn't it 27?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think here's a picture of
Oh,
the
my
school. See
goodness.
there? Does it tell you the address?
14th and Morrison, down where the Stadium Freeway is. Cool.
That's beautiful.
And then Eunice is in there, as well as my mother. And that's the picture of my mother right there that's in there. And they're in individual pictures.
Well, here's Eunice's picture.
Yeah.
Well, it really is like something good.
Yeah.
I read about all these people.
Yeah.
I get to know them, and then Mrs. Rutherford will get something out and show me a picture, and it's kind of like, You look just like I knew you would.
See, here's another picture of my mother that was taken at the same time. She had real long hair. No, you can see it from there. It's a big picture.
Oh my goodness.
She had real long hair, and she had them cut the bob off because her mother wouldn't let her cut her hair, so she just had them take that off. But that's another picture. That's the picture there. This is the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was. She's very lovely. She was a brown-skinned woman. She was just pretty as she could be. But as I said, she was an only child, and sometimes she acted like an only child. Well, I'm just being honest. Now, her picture's in there, too. But it's that one over there that's there.
Her last name was
James.
James.
Bessie James, and Eunice would be Bagley.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And people get really upset with me when I say, do not send me anything and tell me,
Who in the heck?
well, you look there, you can see anybody there, you guys. You look hard.
Oh, here she is.
Oh, right here.
Are there only two non-white?
Yeah,
Well,
but
there's a Chinese
but
girl.
what you might have to remember is we're talking about Portland in the
I know.
30s. This is
You know,
far.
the Advocate on
They all had
an
their
annual
favorite-
basis is talking about like celebrating graduations, and it's got this little tiny list, and there's maybe 6 kids graduating in 1928 or 29 or whatever, and, you know, and somebody's coming out of Benson, and 2 are coming out of Grant, and somebody's coming out of Commerce,
And you know, and like my mother was valedictorian of her class. She was at Russellville Grade School, and I thought we have a picture of her, but I never saw that. You know, and I thought, well, how do you get records? Do you go to the school to get records of what happened to people? Because you know that Russellville school has been closed for a long, long time.
just demolished.
And I don't know
like
which.
like a month ago.
Right, I know. And I don't know where she lived. I don't know whether she lived in 117th at the time she was in school there, or whether she lived in Montevilla at the
No.
80, you know, that.
You mentioned that 88th property, and that might be one that I find some reference to.
Well, now, Grandma lived at 1150 Southeast 88 for all those years.
Wait a minute, I thought we had 1150.
Southeast 88. It's not Yam Hill, it's Southeast 88. 1150 is where James lives.
So it's the same address, but a different street.
No, that address and street have been the same since 1930s at least. 1925.
Did you ever read
I thought I had
the comments they said
1150
about-
Southeast Yam Hill.
What do you
too.
have? What do you have?
I have 1150 Southeast Yam Hill.
Cross that off. That's
Okay.
incorrect.
What's
Completely.
the address there?
I don't have it. That's the one that's approximately 92nd. That's where my parents bought their first property.
92nd is
Yeah,
Southeast
and I don't
Yam Hill.
have
Okay, so
the
it was
address.
never an inner city property.
No,
Okay,
no.
so 1180 Southeast.
1150.
1150.
Southeast 88.
Southeast
It's an
88.
address
Sorry,
that
my
has
address.
been and was always. It's not unusual. It's just Southeast 88. What do you see there?
It said about among ourselves, it said Eugene Basham, they called it Lefty, and she had the last word always.
No wonder.
And Bessie James was a good cook who wants to be a nurse.
Yeah, she was waiting to go to nursing school, but she got married to my father instead. She couldn't get into any nursing school here in Portland, even with her good grades, because they didn't take black girls. And they had at least 6 or 7 nursing schools. They had school at Portland University, not Portland. They had a school up on the hill at
The
University of Oregon. They had a school at Emmanuel. They had a school at Good Samaritan. They had a school at Seventh-day Adventist Hospital, and they had a school at Providence Hospital.
And all these are Christian organizations.
Yeah, real Christian. Mm-hmm. That's right, but she
So
couldn't get
much
to
for
school.
Christianity.
Yeah, right.
Do you have a picture of the Shiloh Church?
Oh no, I wish I did.
Well, me
You know,
too.
because my mind still has this picture of this cute little church. You know, it looks like a little schoolhouse really, and it's got these 3 little steps and a little thing, you know, and it's just a very, very ordinary kind of place. Except that,
Why do you think Shiloh ceased to exist as a church?
you know,
Because it was, what, 20 years ago?
I don't know, because my grandmother died. Now let me tell you when Grandma died. Grandma died in '53. And
Sarah James.
Sarah James died in '53, and she's the one that had that church.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what happened to that church. And I do know that we were on the farm from 39 on, so I'm not, I don't really...
Did she have her funeral ceremony at the church?
Yes.
So
No, the funeral was at, her funeral service...
small. So.
Wait a minute, her funeral service was not there. Well, she had a huge funeral. Everybody's grandpa. This is my mother's. But a funeral service was a huge service, but it was at the funeral home where she knew the people. And she went by all the time. And she died like April 1953. But anyway, that was, and she's born September 15th, 85, I think, something like that. And we don't have, and the only write-up we have, I've got a write-up somewhere, but it's little tiny. It doesn't give you any information. In fact, but what you have to remember is, black people did not count, no matter what they had done or what they did, unless they had lots and lots of money or something to make them special. There was no way that they would write about them or talk about them.
And there are all of these like deferential remarks. It's kind of like, despite the fact that this person isn't white, they have achieved this.
Right. So it's a really, it's really hard, so.
Trying to research old records, I'll tell you, when you're chasing people and then you got to deal with this race issue and this not counting kind of issue,
and people don't realize that a lot of stuff is lost because of the discount. Yeah. He did that, so what? Mm-hmm. And it's real hard to make people come to understand that somebody did something and they worked and stayed with it. Like Grandma in that church, mm-hmm. I remember from the time I was a little kid, that church was her heart and soul. She went to that church
I'm
every
going to find this. Get the stuff on Shiloh to you because it's just this long running Shiloh Baptist Church year after year after year with whatever is going on.
They had some. They would just have these big battles because they were all trying to take the church away from her.
And they had an annual barbecue. Annual picnic barbecue out there. And
I remember we used to have we didn't have all those barbecues at the Shiloh Church. Shiloh Church used to go with Bethel and all these others. I remember going to these wonderful church picnics when I was a little kid. And they were at Columbia or Peninsula Park. They were not at Shiloh. Mm-hmm. And everybody brought food.
Were combined?
They were all combined. You brought the food and stuck it down, and everybody, it was just wonderful. And people talk about they don't like to go to potlucks. Mm-hmm. Well, and we had to dress up when we were little kids going to picnics.
I saw those photos.
Yeah, we didn't get to
the white dresses.
Yeah, you wore your little cute dresses or your nice socks and shoes. I mean, you couldn't go there looking like you were going to play. Right. You got it. A picnic is right.
God forbid you go to a picnic and play ball and get dirty.
But anyway, we had, so it was quite a thing. But I loved it, and the people. It just seemed to me it was such the most wonderful thing in the world. My mother was a good cook too. I mean, I didn't have any problems. I love it.
What do you think about things today?
How and what?
Well, what's your perception of
racism?
And things in life in Portland. And I mean, you left here for a long period of time, and were a professional person, and so was your husband, and you lived in a much more expansive, open-minded part of the country in California, and you come back here and...
But, it was very hard for me to come back because it's very provincial, and the streets get smaller, and they have no problem making them smaller, which just fascinates me to no end. But racism, though, what you have to remember is that it's a part of the culture, and it's a part of what we are and what the community is, and you cannot deny that it exists. You have to figure out how to manage with it and try to see clearly and not be blinded by this kind of thing. I do know that it's a lot easier today than it was when I was coming along. I always wanted to work. Guess what? I wanted to work as a waitress or as a sales girl, or as an usherette in the theater. None of those things were open to me when I was in high school and looking for summer jobs. You know what I did? When I was looking for summer jobs in high school, I had to pick berries, beans, whole onions. I did all of that dirty work because there was no place for me to go to the little stores or little places. And we couldn't eat in a lot of the places either. So today is, it's better. It is not all gone, but it's better. It's not all gone. There's no way I could say that everything's just gone.
No.
But at least, we used to have people call us names out their car windows if we go on the beach. My parents would take us to picnic at the Columbia River, and they would have all their little children gathered with them. We didn't run wild. We weren't allowed to do that. And people would yell from their boats and call names.
Things aren't as overt anymore.
Yeah,
but there's this kind of veneer sometimes.
Well, and then people think because nobody does any of those things anymore, that so everything's just perfect. Well, everything is not perfect because I have a lot of friends who are Caucasian because I grew up with them. I have friends that I've known since I was 10. I was at this reunion the other day, and this girl walked in. She said, "Laverne, I still remember you when we were in the 5th grade." I said, "What were we doing?" Because I knew she didn't go to school with me, and I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, you remember when we used to go to Catholic Bible school 2 weeks in the summertime at Wilsonville when I was in the 5th grade because there was only, in Wilsonville at that time, there was one gas station and one grocery store, and that was Wilsonville. The rest of it was far."
Yeah.
So, I said, "Oh, I remember that." I said, "I didn't remember you in the class with her, but I remember that was a fun time." But, I do acknowledge and admit that things are better today than they used to be. We could not purchase property. We couldn't do things even if we had money. That was one of the terrible things. And even if you had knowledge, you couldn't always get what you were supposed to do, but we do live in a place that's a little bit, it's better than that.
So how do you remember how that made you feel?
It was very painful. I never, I don't think anyone, nobody stops feeling insults and injury, even though it happens again.
Yeah, it's like you hate something, you will always hate something. It's not like you just kind of ignore it.
Yeah, if somebody insults you, it touches you. Now, what you do with it is what saves you.
Yeah.
If you go crazy and start jumping up and down. I remember once I was a candidate for graduate school, and so I applied for the Oregon State stipend, and I went to a meeting, and I knew, this is 1958, and I knew these people, 6 people on the Oregon State Board, public welfare and all that jazz. I knew these people were judging me from head to toe. My speech, my dress, my behavior, my intelligence, my everything. There wasn't anything they weren't going to see. This is 1958. And I went to this meeting, and I did just fine until one of these commissioners said, "And what does a negress consider such and such?" And I looked at him, and it made me so mad. I was just outraged, and I was just filled with rage. And I said to myself, I had to stop and think. And that's one of the things you learn in social work, if you don't whatever you feel. So I stopped and think, and I said to myself, he's insulting me with the bottom of my teeth. And what shall I say to him? So I remember that I sort of avoided answering him and said something else. He didn't stop. He came right back at me again and said, "And what does a negress say?"
What did his colleagues say?
Well, they didn't say much. You know, at that time, you still have to remember that people, all these people on this board were white. There wasn't
in the
anybody
50s especially.
Yeah, you see, there wasn't anybody on this board that was black. Yeah, see, there wasn't anybody at all who was going to say, don't say that to her. Mm-hmm. I saw somebody look a little bit askance, and I think it was the director of public welfare, Gene Jewett. But nobody ever stopped him. And when I went back to the agency, I finally got out of that interview. I'm boiling at this point. But I
want their money.
Yeah, but I went back to the agency, and I went into the director's office, and I raised all the hell with her. I told her what I thought about that, and I said, you better tell somebody. I said, because I was so mad I was going to spit on it. And she said, oh, I don't think he meant that. I said, I don't care what he meant. He did it. But you know what? I got that scholarship, and I was one of the best candidates that they had. But, you know, it was really, you know...
You paid a lot for it.
Yeah, you paid for it. You got to keep your mouth shut. Do you know what I mean? You got to, you have to keep quiet. And we have to do that.
That's why we have hypertension.
Yeah. Well, see, I don't have much because I usually blow it out.
Now, the people that don't.
Yeah, I don't have any hypertension. I never did have any. But anyway, go ahead. I need to stay on that.
Well, one of the things that continues to concern me is how little people in the community, the entire community, whatever the race is, understand about what the city, how it developed, what it was like, what kind of contributions people made, contributions they continue to make. Nobody appreciates older people anyway.
No,
in this country.
That's right. That's a part of our culture. That's
and
really sad thing.
And this issue of documenting, earlier times and earlier generations, and all the way up to, it's like when we were at the senior center, and Osterhain's family got here in 1932. So somebody gets up and says, well, I came here in 58, or I came here in 62, and Oscar said, 58, 62, who cares? Let's go back to the 30s. And I said, and we're going to go see him next. And I said, Oscar, your history obviously extends much further back, so it's much more interesting, and you have much more longevity, and you understand so much more about connection among people. I said, but their history, which begins here,
right.
Whether it's 58 or 62, is as important to them as
it
yours is to you or to me,
That's true.
And it's all relative.
Yeah,
You can't just say that. A lot happened here in the 50s and 60s. A lot of significant accomplishments because of the growth in the numbers.
That's right. We were like the first black girls out at Maryland. Benita Lewis and I, and it was really, of course, that experience was very good. I have to say that the nuns were wonderful. And I still am very thankful to them for their interest in us and making sure that we were, and the acceptance there was a lot different than in high school because the girls were in so many different places, and it was a wonderful experience. And you can say all you want, but as far as I'm concerned, that was a very, very happy time for me. And I did not do well in school because I wouldn't crack a book. I was exhausted. I stayed at my grandmother's house and went back and forth on the street where it took an hour to get from 88th and Yamhill to the Greyhound bus until then I had to take a half an hour to the Greyhound, and then I had to walk in, which was another half hour. So my experience with going to school it was nice to be there, and I would always go to class, but sometimes I came home and brought books. And I was a C student. There was no excuse for that. I was a very good student. I just didn't do it. I worked on the weekends as a maid in the theater. I worked in that theater they just tore down. My daddy worked there, and I worked there.
The Fox?
Yes. It was the Mayfair. I worked there for 4 summers when I was in, because I couldn't get anything. In fact, I made up my job. I went in and I told the manager, I said, my father said that everybody's supposed to have a maid in their theater. And he looked at me like he thought I was crazy. And I said, my father said, and he said, he kind of looked at me. And so he gave me this job on the weekends. And I got home and my father raised hell. He said, I don't want you working in the theater. He said, I don't want you there. And I don't know what he ever said to the man, and I always felt sorry because I really told that. I made this big thing about it. My dad had said that, but he didn't tell me to go tell the man to give me the job. And the man kind of thought he did. That's why he gave me the job. So I worked on weekends.
So that was the theater where your dad worked all those years?
Yes, my dad worked, well, he worked at the Orpheum. My dad worked in all the theaters in Portland. You need to know all those theaters on Broadway.
Yeah.
That includes the Paramount, the Broadway, the Orpheum, and he worked many, many years in the Orpheum. Yeah. So, Daddy, there's an article in the paper just recently, and Daddy's name was in it. Did you see that?
Uh-uh. I cut out all that theater stuff.
Oh, well, if you have that, because I looked at it and I said, you know, we ought to tell them the rest of the story. Because I looked at it and I said, that's Daddy's, you know, what I want to say. That's Daddy's theater. But he really had worked in a whole lot of theaters. He didn't just, and cause that just happened recently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was just because they just did it before they tore down.
Right, and there were actually several features about the theater history.
Yeah, I only saw the one that had Daddy's name in it. It was on the front of the paper, and
I missed that.
My brother said, "Did you see Daddy's name?"
I might have it, but.
And what I do is I'm a keeper, so I have all kinds of things. I really have to throw away things because I have too much stuff. And I can't remember where I put that. I just know I decided I would keep it. Oh, maybe it's here. Here it is. Here, I'll show you. This Fox Theater Raising, and then somebody came and gave me that, but it's this one right here. See, it says Bagley still a houseman for the Fox for that. See, that's my dad's name.
How did I miss? Oh, it's in the Observer.
No, this is the Oregonian.
2097.
This is the Observer. This is the Observer, but this is the
Oregonian. I have this.
Yeah, you would
know
have
something. A man who was working on some of the salvaging down there calls me one day and he said, I got this predicament and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, I understand that you've been doing this, you've been working on some Black History stuff for several years. And I said, well, yeah, I have. And he said, well, there's one of these benches is left up there, and I've called the Urban League, and they don't want. And I said, well, you know, you're calling economic and interview with Laverne Bagley Brown on August 22nd, 1997.
Sunday school, and then they have the pulpit up in front, you know, little standard, and a little stage there, and we always had to be on stage for Christmas plays and stuff like that, you know. And the preachers went up there, and all these preachers, my grandmother was probably, you know, Sarah James was probably a holy woman. I only say this after much hindsight, you know, after I know all about her and all about the world and people and stuff. She was incredible. Her name was Sarah Campbell James, and she's incredible. But anyway, she's my mother's mother. And she would allow, because she worked almost like a slave for Southern Pacific, cleaning cars. And she had to go to work every morning, like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. She had to catch a streetcar to go. And she lived at 1150 Southeast Yad Hill. That's where she lived for many, many years. That's where she died. That's where, you know, I always went to visit her in that place.
That property's gone, isn't it?
That property's gone out of the family,
but is the house still there?
The house is still there. They have remodeled it. It doesn't look anything like it did when Grandma was there. I even have some pictures of when we have a picture of it, but not really good pictures like we have now. And she always had this beautiful, magnificent, wonderful green lawn and garden. That was her passion. You know, she worked like a slave down here at this train yard, but she kept this beautiful yard, and we always had, we always went there to visit, that's all. But the interesting part of that was she had 2 bedrooms in this house. And one bedroom was hers, and one bedroom was for my mom and dad when they came and brought the kids, and we got to sleep on a pallet in the front room. This is a real small house, and we were
From the Yamhill house.
The Yamhill house where Grandma lived. And this was a really wonderful, we just were delighted to go there. But that second room was also used for roomers. And the roomers often were these guys who would come from the railroad or come to be a minister. They would start out with her at Shiloh Baptist Church in Montevilla, which, as I said, is 76th and Everett. And they would always want to take the church away from her. And O.B. Williams, who was at Vancouver Avenue Baptist, started out with her. I remember him.
Oh, no.
I remember him when he was there in 1939 or so. I remember when he was there.
Now, was she the pastor of the church?
Oh, she was never the pastor. She owned the church. She never preached. She read the Bible every day. She never went in the pulpit. That wasn't her thing. They owned this church, so they would have a little church.
Well, in like the mid-20s, because the church begins to, I've been through the 10 years of the Advocate newspaper, which is all that's left
and I don't know
of the Kennedy's
right.
paper.
Okay.
So from 1923 to 1933, and that's what this index that I've just given you comes from. And the reason that everything with the Bagley name is shaded in is because these are all citations from 1928 that we had just put into the big, this index is like 400 pages long. And we wanted to distinguish what we had already researched versus the years we were just bringing in to the index. And so the Bagley name doesn't show up before 1928, but Shiloh shows up in 23 or 24. And there's several pastors, and one pastor kind of resigns in a huff and says he's tired of preaching exclusively to his wife.
Well, what happened is Grandma and Miss Thompson were the 2 ladies that were there every Sunday, no matter what happened. Now, I, as a child, would get to go sometimes, and we didn't live with Grandma, so, we didn't go there all the time. And then I went to Catholic school and became Catholic, and we don't think that was an eruption that landed the whole family for going. But he was right. The people that came to church there were people who were either new in town. There was not a big congregation. Yeah. It was a very tiny congregation. I could name you people who used to go to church there. Charlotte Lewis, who's the artist, her family, when they first came to church, the whole family went to church with us at Shiloh Baptist. You go ask them about Shiloh Baptist. The other people who went to Shiloh Baptist when they first came to Portland, Miss Plummer's son-in-law, what's his name?
Plummer?
Bernadette
Plummer.
But her son-in-law, whose name, and I've known him since he was 10 years old because he came to Grandma's church at Shiloh Baptist Church.
So he married one of the Plummer kids.
He married Olgan Plummer, the oldest girl. And his name is, I will think of it because I know it. And he came there with his mother when he was 10 years old, and they were in that church. And then Benjamin Webb, who lives here in Portland, just over here on 10th, also went to church there. He was part of the Donaldson family, who also started out with Grandma in Shiloh Baptist Church. And Mr. Donaldson, Reverend Donaldson, was a minister, was a preacher out there at Grandma's church for a little while, and then he got his own, but he tried to get Grandma's before they after this one.
What was his name again?
His name was Reverend Donaldson. Donaldson, and his stepson.
And that's got to be after 33 because
it is after 33.
Because his name doesn't.
Yeah, it is after.
Is Reverend Anderson after?
Reverend Anderson. I remember when he came.
Do you really?
Yes, he and his wife. I remember what he looks like.
After he left Mount Olivet in a huff, he went out to Shiloh.
Well, see, I remember him and his wife were there. He had a lovely wife, and he's kind of heavy-set guy, and she's kind of heavy-set. They were just lovely little people. They were just really nice little
go-getters.
And they went to bat to get the church away from Grandma. Thompson too. I mean, everybody that came were trying to take this church away from him, And these ladies didn't preach. Neither one of these ladies tried to preach.
James and Adelaide Anderson.
Yeah, they were. When were they there?
Well, I don't have it in here, but what in the big index? I should have bought that thing.
Well, that's all right.
But oh boy, they were out there in.
Would you guys like something to drink,
20s.
like water or pop or orange juice?
No, I'm good. The late 20s, and they're still there. I mean, I'm in the detailed index for 1930 right now, and they're still there. But then Reverend Gardner comes.
Yeah, I remember him.
And Mount Olivet makes a pitch to make Shiloh a Baptist mission of Mount Olivet, and Reverend Anderson is not going to have anything to do with this.
Well, see,
and he's their spokesperson out at Shiloh, and they say, thanks, but no thanks, we're staying independent. And the thing, one of the things that the newspaper talks about is that Shiloh celebrates the fact that they were the first black church that was completely out of debt and stayed out of debt.
Yeah, they weren't always hassling for money. In fact, I remember people always gave pennies, or nobody gave dollars, and you always brought pennies in your handkerchief to pay it.
When did they go on? But they built a bigger church then.
No.
Not in the time that you remember.
Never.
So when did that building? What happened?
They had this cute little building, and let me tell you what my memory goes back to in this church. It goes back to about 1935 when our house burned down and we moved to town. And I remember some of it before then because we used to come and go to Grandma's church. But I'm talking about seeing all these ministers. That's between 35 and 39 is where my memory is with these ministers. Because after that, we moved out to the farm, and so I would not see these people. We moved out to West Linden, so we wouldn't see these people. But I have memory of all those names you mentioned in Grandma's church.
I've got to bring you the Shiloh Index.
Okay, between 35 and 39. Now, those people may have been there. But what I remember is that Grandma and Miss Thompson owned the property, and they let all these ministers come and run the show. They were basically women who kind of, what we would say, knew their place. They never attempted to run the church in front. It was always, we do this or we do that. And they just want, and I don't know about the fight of the independents, but the reason my parents were married in Vancouver and Otto Rutherford was, I just looked at my dad and mom's wedding thing the other day, and it's over at my sister's house, but he was their best man at the wedding, but they were married in Vancouver because these people had this big fight about you will not be married in a one-room storefront type of church. It wasn't a storefront at all. It was a cute little house that was a church, and they had, on the side, they had a whole lot there, and it always had these lovely fruit trees, and the fruit trees were all whitewashed up halfway with the lime, and it was just a very pleasant place. Now, I've been out there recently, and it's so, there's a little apartment thing there, and it's little, it's just really miserable looking. There was no road in front of this church. They had just rutted road there. It was just off of 76, and it was
right. And the church building is gone, right?
Oh yeah. I don't even think, like my grandmother's house on Southeast 88th is existing, but it's been so remodeled that you can't see it, and the people.
So Mrs. James' house on Southeast 88th, or a different grandmother?
No. I only have two grandmothers in this family. I've got Mrs. James and Mrs. Bagley. There are just two grandmothers.
And so Mrs. James is on 1150 Southeast Yam Hill.
That's right. And the house now is so very redone, and the people who have it now have just, they are the trashiest people in the neighborhood. They do not keep it. It's just real sad because it was always such a fun place for us to go.
And Mrs. Bagley's on Southeast 88th.
Oh, no, never. Mrs. Bagley, my father's mother, would be on, it's 100 and something and older. It's southeast. It's where, you know what? My grandfather owned a whole bunch of property out in Russellville. My grandfather Bagley. And that's out, And I can give you the address for that because it's on one of the... Oh, wait a minute, I picked up the wrong thing. It's on one of the death certificates for the... this is my appliance stuff, and that's not going to get me any information. Not at all. It would be on one of the death certificates for my mother. And I just... Oh, here's Samuel Wayman Bagley, and that's my grandfather, and that's the grandmother that we'd be talking about. Now, their address, what is she? Well, you have to have an address. You die somewhere, don't you?
Pretty much. I don't know if it ever says that, though.
Yeah, it does. Oh, I guess he died in the hospital. Oh, well, let's look at my other grandmother. I don't mean anything. Here's their address. The one for Samuel. Now, let me tell you who my grandfather is. Because he's the one that you shouldn't find in the mound. All of the records way back, though, they came in 1918. And his name is Samuel Wayman Bagley. It's Waymon. It's not spelled like others. And their address is 10304 Southeast Alder, meaning that they lived at 104th and Alder, 103rd and Alder. And they lived there, well, they lived there from the time I was born until I guess they got rid of the property. But, and the people that live there, let me tell you who this is my father's parents. They are Samuel and Maybird Scarborough Bagley. That's and her name is spelled M-A-Y. It's a dreadful name, but that's her name.
Oh, cute.
Well, I think it's horrible, but anyway, M-A-Y-B-I-R-D, and her name is Scarborough. It's, I have to figure, and it's spelled Scarborough, is S-C-A-R-B-O-U-G-H. Wait a minute.
S-C-A-R...
B-O-R-O-U-G-H.
Yeah.
It's
And this is the same Samuel Wayman, or this is his father?
Samuel Wayman is her husband.
Okay.
That's Mr. and
Okay.
Mrs. Samuel Wayman Bagley. And then there's a son whose name is Samuel Bagley, and I was getting all this stuff and
He was born here?
No, he wasn't. No, was not born.
So when they
came
in
all their
1918.
children were born except Gladys, who was born here in 1919. Gladys Bagley Dove is their youngest child. My father was the oldest. My father was the oldest of Maybird and Samuel's children. However, Samuel was his first child. So we have a Samuel Bagley family here, too. That's my father's half-brother. But the property, they not only did they own property on 103rd and Alder, they owned the property on about 99th and Stark, which housed a Japanese grocery. And the Japanese used to rent from my parents, and that Japanese family is on 102nd and Stark now. But they're still there. And you know they were taken away during the wartime. All the Japanese were picked up and moved away. But my grandfather used to own that property. And there's nothing standing there to show you that either. It was wonderful. It was a little old, it was a white kind of wash shed thing, and it sort of formed a whole block in sort of a semicircle, and you could see all the fruits and vegetables and stuff all out there. You know, it was an old-time thing. I'm remembering back to the 30s, you guys, so I'm talking about the 30s.
How did your grandfather come to acquire all this property?
He was a really hard worker, and, property was inexpensive. And you also know that they had laws in Oregon that said black people cannot own property.
Right.
Well, I don't know how come, all my grandparents owned property.
Depends on who you bought from.
Well, it depends on who was the realtor, whether he would go to bat for you and sell it to you, because most of the realtors had a real gentleman's agreement not to sell to blacks in certain areas. And that was very...
We found a couple of cases where realtors were expelled for ignoring that.
Oh yeah. They just had a real big thing about you will not.
Was Russellville, maybe that was a pretty open place?
Well, Russellville was like, I have to be honest with you, Russellville was like a shanty town. It was everybody's house was a little tiny, little space.
And it was acreage, right?
It was acreage.
Like living in the country.
But there were rutted roads. There were no finished roads.
It was outside the city.
Yeah, it was outside the city. And we lived at the time in Ventura Park. We didn't live, when we lived in town, we didn't live in Russellville.
When you
and
say
now,
Ventura Park, what do you
Ventura
mean?
Park is my parents lived at 1118 Southeast 117th. And right this minute, across the street from that area is Ventura Park, which you can look at on your Portland map.
Is that house still there?
Yes. I meant to go and take a picture of it the other day, but it doesn't look like it did when we were there.
Well, a lot of them don't, but the remarkable thing is if there's anything still out there,
It's
a
still
miracle.
there. Yeah, it's
with all
still
the
there.
changes that happened that far out.
And we had a whole lot there that my dad used to always make this gorgeous garden on. We also had a cow. I remember this cow ran. And we had outdoor toilet there. And that was a very small house. We had bunk beds in that house. And we were like the only black family there. If you went just, from 117th to 102nd, there were all, 99. There were all these black families in that little area, but we weren't there. We were up, in this. So,
Say those boundaries again, where the black people live there.
pardon me?
Can you repeat that? The boundaries that you...
Oh, the little area that was
black.
Russellville, where most of the big majority of black people were in that area. It was like 102nd to about 99, and from Stark over to about Burnside, there was this little enclave of. There was the Wilson family there. There was the Reese family. There was the Miller family, which was a black and white couple. There was my Uncle Sammy and his wife were there.
What's their last name? Bagley.
Sammy is Bagley. He's Samuel Bagley. And he's not Junior. He's just Samuel Bagley. Because my grandfather, I have his thing here, and he has a different name than my grandfather. And he was not the child of, how shall I say it? He was not the child of neighbors. He was somebody else's child. I've forgotten who he was.
When you say the Reese family, you mean Will Reese? That first name?
James Reese was their name. And their son was David and Juanita, and the mother was Clarabelle. They were, it's R-E-E-S-E. It was James and Clarabelle Reese with children who were David and Juanita. And David is still alive. He's a Jehovah's Witness or something, and he's very involved in church, but he's not in this area. I think he's in Oakland. And the sister Juanita, who had this magnificent singing voice, is dead. I understand. I know. But they were one of the families that lived there. And then the Wilsons, they're a great, huge family. And then another family that lived there were the Dorches, D-O-R-T-C-H, I think. Joe Dorch. He was a wonderful, wonderful old black man. He used to have a horse and buggy. He used to pick up junk, I think.
Every neighborhood had one of those.
Old man. Remember once when I was about 4 and a half, I demanded to go ride with him. We were in our car, and I think they let me ride 2 blocks with him. And after I got with him, I was just panicked. I wanted to get back in my daddy's car. When my daddy was gone, I had to wait until the little horse trotted us there. I still remember where it was.
What brought your grandparents to Portland?
Wait a minute. On the one side, the grandparents from Florida. They came from Palatka, by the way. You ever hear that?
And that's the Bagleys or the James?
That's the Bagleys. Bagleys are from Florida. And Palatka is spelled P-A-L-A. I always have to really stop and think about that, because that's a...
P-A-L-A-T-K-A?
Yeah, I think so. I have to make sure.
That place.
You never. Well, no, you didn't, because it's a really tiny place. I mean, it's a very tiny place. I mean, and they came here. They specifically. My daddy said they all got new clothes. They got dressed up. They got on the train, and they came here in 1918 in order to take care of the mother's health. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, and the death certificate says she has one kind of disease, which I know she didn't have because the symptoms don't make sense.
But they were relocating out of Florida
They
for her
were
health.
relocating out of Florida for her health. That's why they came here.
A lot of people did
This
that.
place.
But why would anybody come to Portland?
This was
It-
such a backwater.
Well, not only was it a backwater, but it was a very primitive place, and it also was the laws on the books are highly
And all the
prejudiced.
exclusionary
In fact,
laws.
when I went to the University of Denver in 1958 for graduate school, I was teased about being called Miss Oregon because that was a very disparaging kind of thing to say to me, because they were very aware, and the fellows particularly said, "Laverne, don't you understand what the laws are in Oregon around black people and all of that?" I said, "Listen here, you guys, I was born there. I helped change those laws. In 1952, I was with Belton Hamilton and Bill McCoy and all these guys out here helping register people to change those laws, so I knew exactly what the laws were." But they laughed at me because I always talked positively about the state. And they couldn't understand that at all. But, no, the Bagley family came here for reasons of health. And then my grandmother, James, that's another fascinating story. She's the lady with the church. She came here with my grandfather, and she literally came from Hattiesburg and Meridian, Mississippi. That's where she's from. And she's a Campbell, and there's a huge family of them. Anyway, she came there with her husband, and they went to Joliet, Illinois first, and I remember this very well from what she used to say. Then they went to Goldendale and Kennewick, Washington, and lived there until they came to Portland in 1912.
Boy.
And my mother started school, and my mother went to Russellville School.
What was Mr. James' name?
Well, that's a good question. I sent for his death certificate the other day, and we always thought his name was Jody James. And apparently, he was kind of a scoundrel. Now, I got to tell you about him. He's the playboy in the family. And grandmother got rid of him when my mother was about 12 years old. And apparently, and I didn't know why until I met him, and then I thought, oh, I can see why she got rid of him. There was nothing holy about him. He's just a real playboy. But anyway, his name was like, and we have some concern about finding out what his name was, because I thought his name was just Joe James. And so when I sent to get his death certificate down in Los Angeles, I couldn't get it. They couldn't identify him. And when I asked my brother, who went down there with my mother when he died in Lancaster, California, you know, how come I can't get some? My brother didn't have any stuff, and I didn't ask my mother before she died, so I didn't know. I understand he may have had a different name, because I understand he worked as a longshoreman. And maybe I can get from Mr. who I'm going to see, and I haven't seen Rutherford, what he thinks.
I'm going to see the Rutherfords. I go up there usually every Wednesday, and I just got back in from out of town Tuesday night.
Okay.
But I'll see them next week.
Well,
And
I
can ask
promised
them
that I
for
would come and see them, so
You
I'm
should.
due to go see them,
well, that'd be great.
because they know my father very well, and he was like pallbearer at my mother's funeral and all that sort of thing. But he may know what he may remember what Grandpa's name is.
When do you think they broke up?
When my mother was 12, and my mother was born in 1906. So 6 and 12 is like 1918.
So it wouldn't be in the newspapers. 'Cause
I don't think so.
I
I
started in 1923. I may find
No, I
references
don't-
to your grandmother, but I'm not going to
You're
find
going to
him.
find references to her. In fact, you might find, I don't know, she was not, now my mother was very conscious of what people thought about her and all this, and my grandmother was only concerned and conscious about church and what the Lord said and what was right and what was wrong. In fact, in 1930, I understand that she took a group of people down to Salem, and Governor Julius Meyer, who's related to the Meyer and Frank people, she made him with her group of white friends, because she always collected all the people out of her neighborhood and said, we got to go do this. See, she'd be the instigator, but because she was black, she didn't count. You know what I mean? And when you're black in this state, it was really, it's still, some of that still hangs over. But she didn't count. So she would get all her neighbors together, and there was a man convicted of killing a white person on a train. He was a friend or something. And that man's was going to be executed. And she got them to stop the execution. She worked for the railroad. You know, she worked in those trains, and so she knew a lot of stuff. And she wasn't a gossipy woman. She tended to be a quiet woman who spoke when she needed to speak. You know, my mother talked continuously. My grandmother did not do that. She only spoke when she needed to speak, and then she had something to say. She was very, very bright.
So what year was
extremely uneducated.
When was your grandmother involved in this murder?
Involved in going to the governor was 1930, sometime in 1930.
That's in the paper. And it talks about it being a frame
but did they wouldn't talk about this woman, though.
No, they talk about the case.
Yeah.
Because the advocate campaigned very heavily, spoke very, very highly of Julius Meyer in his campaign.
That's right.
It was very clear that Mrs. Kennedy and a whole lot of people in the black community
my grandmother knew Mrs.
him.
Kennedy very well. She knew the Kennedys. My grandmother James knew them well. So she was involved in that process. And I always remember how she talked about, we knew he didn't do it. We knew it was this and that and the other. And then my grandmother died in about 1953. And then this man was exonerated in about 1954. And the man in Chicago who committed the crime was in the newspaper. You can find it in the Journal of the Oregonian. You can find it. See, I don't know what the man's name was, but if you
it'll be in the papers in 1930.
Well, you will, but what I'm saying, in 1930 you can find it, but you also will be able to find it in the white newspapers for 1954 or something like that. That this guy said whatever he said. That you can find that.
And he comes back and tells that
he was on his deathbed, so he said, yeah. But the other guy had been held in prison all this time.
Yeah. How do you make up for that?
Yeah, he'd been held in prison from 1930 until, and I don't know.
The man was a railroad employee, wasn't he?
I don't remember. I don't know anything about it. I just know the story.
Well, I'm in 1930, hot and heavy, making this index, and I know it's in there.
Okay,
it's just a matter of
but my grandmother's name, you see, because of being a black person, would not be anywhere. And she was a black person she owned property, but her only status in the community was of a working woman down in the lowest job you could get. She said to clean cars, and her hands were all my mother had beautiful hands, and I remember my father saying to my mother once, I hope your hands will never look like your mother's. And what he was talking about, my grandmother had to put her hands in lye, and so her hands were all cracked and hard, and
the
just
days
really
before latex gloves.
Well, before, but they wouldn't have considered that for a woman who was a slave type woman.
No.
I mean, she was. I have to show you a picture of my grandmother. I have an old picture of her.
Oh my!
She's this old lady who was very incontinent. She would have just loved her. Everybody did. But she was, this is taken in her house by somebody who came by one day and took her picture. I stayed at her house at the time and took a picture. And she was this quiet woman.
Perfect skin.
Oh yeah, she had absolutely glorious skin. But my mother had brown skin, and mother had beautiful skin also. And when I was a teenager, I had the most dreadful skin. My mother used to worry to death about it. The skin was just incredible. But she had beautiful skin. She was like...
a wrinkle on her face.
Yeah, and she just had
beautiful.
She was she was a poor woman who was a very dignified woman. She was not one of these people that let you just walk on her and talk over, but she did not walk around making noise about this and that.
Did she ever remarry?
Oh, no. And she never, I didn't know I don't know. I didn't even know that she ever was married to Grandpa James until I used to. You know how kids when you're little, and she was just kind of like this fairy godmother over here who did all these wonderful things, but I never thought she was married or anything else. And then from my mother, I realized that she had this husband who was my mother's father. They were married, and well, she has a very sad tale. Her first love was somebody named Nell. And Nell was lynched in Mississippi because he talked back to a white family, said he didn't do something they said he did, so he was lynched. He was going to leave town, and he was lynched on the way out of town. So anyway, that was her
unrequited love.
Yeah, first love, and then she married my grandfather James, who, and apparently I understood this, they had 5 or 6 miscarriages before my mother was born, and my mother was one of these really spoiled people. She was a good mother. She was a good woman, but she was spoiled. I mean, she was like an only child until she had a brother, and she was still so special.
So your mother is
Bessie James Bagley.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters. Yeah.
What was your father's first name?
My father's first name is Donald, and it's D-O-N-A-L-D, and his middle name is Ward. It's Donald Ward Bagley. And the interesting thing about that, his birth name is Donnell, D-O-N-N-E-L-L. You have something here on this sheet that I was fascinated by. You say that he had a role of the porter in the Duffy's play because I saw a picture of him.
The Duffy's Players, the Shannons of Broadway in 1928.
Yeah, and I knew about that, and my mother he had to go on the road to do some of this, and so my mother said, you can't do that, we can't deal with that. So he went back to doing janitor work in the theaters until he became he did the acting for about a year, and then he became what do I want to say, he became a stagehand. And that's what
Mr. Rutherford has said something to me about that.
Well, yeah, because he was the first black stagehand in Portland, and he had started in the theaters when he was 10 years old with his dad. That's the kind of work they did. They did the janitor work in the theaters. And everybody in the Portland theaters knew them because they did all the theaters along Broadway.
When do you think he became a stagehand?
I know when he became a stagehand officially because the nuns out of Melhurst made me crazy. I was a junior in college, and Sister Mary Teresa would say, and Laverne's father, and I used to think, everybody knows how my father does, and I'm in school with girls whose fathers are lawyers and doctors, and and it's a private girls' school at this time, and it's a very, anyway, and I used to think, why does she keep on this? And I said, well, yeah, Daddy, it's 1950 when the International Alliance of Stage, Electrical, and Theatrical Workers allowed him to become a member. He was allowed to do the work and earn the money, union wages, long before he was allowed to join the union.
International Alliance of Electrical and Stage
and Theatrical Workers, something like that.
Theatrical Workers.
And it was either the CIO or the AFL, or it may have been both of them at the same time, that would not allow a black man in until 1950. And that's recorded somewhere here in Portland. Because Sister Miriam Teresa kept. And what she was trying to get recognition of was the fact that they finally allowed a person
in her own way of calling attention to you incessantly.
Well, but when you're in a small school, everybody knows who everybody is. There were 300 girls at that school at the time, so there isn't any such thing as that you're Miss whoever you are, because everybody knows who you are. And you're all one of 2 black girls, there's no way they didn't know who you were.
Now you grew up in the Ventura Park house?
No, I lived in the Ventura Park house until 1939 when we purchased property at West Lynn.
And was that the house burned down?
The house burned down in Sherwood. And the house burned down on 185th, and I have to look this up.
Okay, so you leave the southeast 117th house.
Yes. And
in 1939.
Go to West Lynn.
Move in 1939 because your parents wanted more land.
Well, they wanted. What happened in 1939 is the Ku Klux Klan burned down the house they were building at 185th and Halsey, approximately. And I have to go look that up to see where it was.
What year was that?
About 39. And I remember the Ku Klux Klan coming to our house with pitchforks and axes and all sorts of things.
In the
saying,
30s.
This is about 1939. And saying, we will burn your house down if you don't stop building it. We don't want you there.
And what did they do?
My dad kept my folks didn't say much that night. I remember them all standing out there.
It's like the drag story in that house out on Northeast Knott that wasn't a KKK thing. It was vandals.
Yeah, okay. But the point is that they said, we'll do this. Yeah, they said, we'll do this, and you must not. And my brother just told me, I never knew that the house burned down. I thought we just moved because we wanted to move. They wanted more land.
So they were building a house out on Northeast Halsey.
185th approximately. You have to say approximately because I haven't got that. That's in
KKK came, threatened your family.
They threatened us.
Your dad continued to build, and then
they burned it down. And my brother said when he went with Daddy to see about the house, he said, Daddy was so, and I always got to go with Daddy. I'm the oldest girl. See, there were 4 girls and then a boy. And this oldest boy was taken with my dad. They were twins. And he said, Daddy held my hand real tight, and he said, I saw a tear come down his eye.
Goodness.
He said he never, he didn't say anything. He just, because our other house, the reason we moved to the 117th house, which was owned by my grandmother James, by the way, she already lived, she still lived on 100, on whatever that street was, but she also owned that house that we lived in, and they were building the new house, and it burned out. Now, our house in Sherwood.
You mean out in Southwest?
We lived in Sherwood we lived there until...
Off by Tiger?
Yeah. We lived in Sherwood at Edie Road. I know exactly where we lived out there because the Edies used to live across the street from us. I used to go to their house, and they had the dryer. You know where Edie Road is at when you're going down 99? And it says, Edie Road, we lived just a couple of streets down there. And we lived there for about 2 years.
After the Halsey thing or before?
No, before the Halsey thing. Before 1935. About 33 to 35, approximately. I have to go look this up.
You were way out there.
Oh yeah, we were out there all by ourselves. I remember. I loved out there. I remember it. My memory goes back. I remember. We also lived before that, and nothing burned down. We lived in Beaverton. And
which is described in the Advocate when people are coming from Beaverton, they're described as out-of-town visitors.
Oh, they are. That's right. That's right. But we used to come all the time. We lived at, let's see. I just got that from my sister the other day, and I was...
You've got to write a book.
Oh, I have to write down
stuff
to make sure that it gets set, because my brothers and sisters all... My one sister would just throw away everything if she could get away with it. I every once in a while say to her, no, Don, you can't. I need to know about that or something. And she says, well, she goes off. I have to find out about that, you guys.
But what year, you were out there before the Sherwood house?
Yes, Beaverton was before the Sherwood house. And we actually have we have an address for the Sherwood house and everything, and I think my parents own that too. Yeah. And the house, and you need to know that the house they lived on, you have Donald Bagley at Yamhill. Well, there is, they did live...
At your grandmother's?
No, that's not a grandmother's.
Oh.
They owned a house, and I'm going to go take a picture of that house because it was my first place to live. And my memory goes back to that house, and my mother said to me one day, I said, what happened when I was doing this and Daddy was doing that? And I told her the house was green and the stove was over there and all that. And she looked me straight in the eye and said, there is no way in this God's world you can remember that because you were 9 months old. And that's when we were moving. So my memory goes back to there. And, but I'm one of the people that is kind of interested in things like that. I have a brother who is too, but all of my brothers and sisters aren't. So I kind of And I remember that. I even remember playing out in the yard, you know, and almost getting run over by the horses. And my mother put me on something. Don't remember her putting me on a leash, which she said she did. I don't remember that. But there is an address for the house on Yam Hill. It's about 92nd and Yam Hill. And my parents owned that house. In fact, they owned that before they got married, so that means that that's recorded, you know, that's recorded downtown. So I have to go check that.
You don't have an address for that, though.
I don't, and I know where it is. I've been to the house, and I look at it, and I'm going to go and take a picture of it.
Well, I need the address for that.
I know you
Boy,
do.
that's remarkable.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me see. No, Horace Dukes. Let's see. Oh, here's the address for the house in Beaverton. And the reason I have it is because my sister's birth certificate has it on it. It's 740 East 72nd Street in North. It says in North. And that's Beaverton. But I also have an address.
But they're on 92nd and Yam Hill. Then they get out to Beaverton. Then they get to Sherwood.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then they go to, if the house burns down, they go to 117th,
right.
and then they go to Westland.
Okay.
And when we went to Westland, what you need to know, the Westland address at that time when we bought the property was Oregon City.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where at in Westland?
We're up at the Oregon Golf Course. You know where the
Oh, yeah,
golf
that
course is?
definitely was Oregon City then.
Yeah, it was, and so if you look it up, you know, I don't know how they list it now. My brother still owns a portion of the property. We had 40 acres on top of the mountain. We looked straight at Mount Hood and straight down the Water River.
Yeah.
But
I'm surprised that isn't still Oregon City in some way.
well, no, because you're on the west side of the river.
Yeah.
It should have never been Oregon City to start with. It didn't even make any sense when we lived there. We had to go through Westland, and then when we got to our property, it was Oregon City. But it did, you know, it was on the west side of the river. It should have never been Oregon
So that's
City.
how you wound up going to Westland High School.
Yeah, I went 4 years to Westland High School. Listen, you guys, I just went to my 50th class reunion.
Wow.
I did. I have to show you another picture. That was fun. This is not a picture. This is just a...
I went to my 25th one.
You did?
Yeah.
Well, you're not as old as I am.
Well, that's true, but I'm getting there.
This is what they did. This is what they did for our placemats. They put all of our pictures from the high school reunion, high school class. They put our pictures on there,
Good Lord.
and my picture's on the other side. But that's how they did it.
We'll talk about the white bread and butter
Yeah,
on
Well,
Westland.
yeah. You have mostly a German community, not Hispanic, not Indian, not Asian, not anything in the world, and I was the only black kid in that class.
You look black.
Who? Show me.
One guy right here. He kind of looks black to me.
Oh no, he's very Caucasian. Yeah. He has kinky hair though. I just saw him the other day.
So what are you?
Don't you see me there?
Right there. Little pearls on.
Yeah, I used to be so fussy about. Yeah, that's my picture. And I have that picture right over there on that. That's right there in the corner of that picture.
What did your father do?
My father was the stage hand, and he did stage hand and all. You know, I told you he started out 10 years old helping his dad in the theaters. He all his life did theaters. He was a very good stagehand too. I mean, he was one of those that they asked him one time to teach at Portland University about stage lighting and stuff because he was really very good. But he didn't have any education. He had 1 year of high school at Benson High School.
Wow.
He went to Cooch School. He put himself in the third grade when he came because he had a friend he met, and he was in third grade. He already knew how to read and write because in Palatka, Florida, they did not have any. They hadn't any school for him, and his mother taught him to read and write before he went to school. So I can get you that address because I know where that is.
And they stayed out in Westland?
Who?
Your parents till the rest of their lives?
They stayed in Westland until They kept the property,
Mhm.
but they stayed in West Lynn until they actually bought some property in Portland at 615 Northeast Sacramento, where we had people come and they had to get the police after them too because they said you can't live here.
What year was that?
1951 or 52.
They stayed on in West Lynn, kept the property, but moved into Portland to 615 Northeast Sacramento
That's right.
around 51, 52.
Yes. And that was because we had a real serious... My one sister had to go to the TB hospital in 48, and my other sister died in 49 from leukemia. We had never been sick in our lives. We were real healthy. And then all of a sudden we get to be grown up and we have these horrible diseases. Not grown up, but teenagers.
You know, that house is probably 2 doors away from where Reverend Anderson and his wife lived before
Which house?
they moved out to Montevilla,
Which house?
the Sacramento house.
Where did they live?
Oh, no, they were in Tillamook, 623 Northeast.
Well, let me
Tillamook.
tell you
Close, but
something.
not-
The house on 615 Northeast Sacramento is torn down. My folks sold it to